time's your test? Are you guys the first test on Thursday? 8:20 on Thursday. You get to see me for a whole hour and 20 minutes. That's 80 minutes with me. Wow. I mean, I'm with me all the time, so I'm kind of used to it. But you guys, another 30 minutes of that? Anybody have 3 tests on any day? Tuesday? Or Thursday, I mean? Who has 3 tests on Thursday? Awesome. Yeah, that's kind of the bad one. I have 2 in the special topics project. Anybody have a test on Friday? A few. I have 1. Who has a test tomorrow? Who has a test tomorrow? All right. So I didn't get to the B's for horizontal and vertical integration, so I cut off a lot. I narrowed it down. You guys should do great on this. You can write pen or pencil on this one. Second semester, though, until the AP exam, everything involving a sentence in pen, blue or black pen. Then you turn it. Then you turn it. But if it's not a sentence, so things are just a phrase or letters, you could write in pen, pencil. Gotta get used to writing in pen. And pen it's easy to write with. All right, let's finish up. Because we got the food monopolies yesterday, aka Friday. Oh, one more thing. Did you notice it's kind of cold this weekend? Did you notice that?
Never noticed.
Yes. So I'm sitting inside, my wife and I are sitting inside on Saturday, and it's like you couldn't really do a lot. I mean, it's 20 below, sitting there. And I had a weird flashback to COVID. And sitting inside and not really being able to go anywhere and just kind of stuck inside. Anyone else have that? That kind of weird, like, oh, this reminds me. Oh. I'm not saying I wouldn't have been doing anything else but sitting at home, but it's nice to have an option. It seemed like I really didn't have an option. Yeah.
We didn't get
Where we end up?
we into that. No, we got
No, we got to
Oh, did we get half?
No, we finished, okay, so we finished food monopolies with the economies of scale, and then we got to Alexander Graham.
Oh, we got Alexander Graham Bell who invented, yeah. What? Yeah, a bunch of inventions. What was the first word spoken on a telephone? Can you hear me? And then, of course, could you come in here, please? So that's Graham Bell. Then we get to Christopher Schultz, the typewriter. It's amazing how fast the typewriter took hold. In 1867, there's still, I was looking at the 14th Amendment. It's still written, the official 14th Amendment was still written by a scribe. Within 10 years, all the laws are typed. That's how fast it took for the typewriter to take over. And here's one of the first typewriters at a rotating, the letters are on this rotating cylinder. When you type, it would push the cylinder into a cloth that had ink on it and press it against the newspaper. And that's how the original typewriters work. And you can really see it better on this next picture. This is why we have the weird keyboard. Not weird, it wasn't weird then, but it makes absolutely no sense to keyboard now. And why would you ever put E and A here, where it's relatively hard to get? Why? Yes. Yeah, slow it down. And who ever played with an old portable typewriter? Did anyone just push them all down so you just get them stuck? Yeah. Yeah, it slows it down because each letter is a little hammer, and it comes up forward. And that's why they have letters over here, or these letters you don't use as much. If they're here, they get stuck if you use them too much. I remember in the 1990s, they were talking about changing the keyboard, and they actually talked about that as early as the 1960s when they started having electronic typewriters. And it just never stuck because everybody learned the keyboard we have now, and it's just there. And my guess is it will be as long as there's keyboards. I had to type a couple papers on a portable, and it's hard when you're not playing as you have to type. So let's get to another biggie. This is no particular order of innovation. I could have done this one first, but I just wanted to do typewriter. But the electric dynamo, Faraday invented this actually about 50 years before the second industrial revolution, but this is an electric generator. There had been batteries and a couple other methods to make electricity. Zinc and nickel batteries, static electricity, but Faraday was working on, his idea was using magnetic power. And you can create a magnet by running electrical currents through a wire. It's electric, it's magnetic. And he dawned on it, just like a revelation, by using iron filings and noticing this. If electricity can create a magnet, can a magnet create electricity? So his experiment was, in this very easy schematic, there's the old schematic, but here's a little bit easier one to see. It's like a magnet inside an iron core and spun it, and that created electricity. And it took a while to figure out better ways, actually a method using what to use it to transmit the power. Like, for example, it took about 50 years to figure out copper wire worked better after a lot of different experiments. And, you know, big deal if you make electricity if you have nothing to use the power for. Doesn't do a lot of good. But that is, his dynamo is still the main generating power for electricity to this day. A brilliant design. If you go out to Canyon Ferry and look at the 4 massive dynamos that they have there, it's basically this. They're huge magnets that are spun inside iron cylinders. Now the power for there is water. Coal-powered ones, they heat water, or coal-powered electric dynamos, they heat water, the water creates steam, the steam runs through and turns the dynamo. Windmills turn a dynamo. That's all it is. It's absolutely remarkably easy, but how do you transmit the power? It's easy in one of those ways that's easy after you see it. It's not easy to come up with. It's absolutely brilliant. But then it's like, oh gosh, it was right in front of us. But how do you get the power? There are 2 basic methods, direct current and alternating current. Nikola Tesla came up with a way of making alternating current. Thomas Edison's lab made it through direct current. And Edison would actually go put electricity through its body and power a light bulb that way. And the thing was, he did not. But there are certain advantages to direct current. Direct current, you weren't tied to a massive system. So every house could have a dynamo in some way and power it right there. And that was Edison's plan. Every house, every building would have its own dynamo. And therefore, direct current. Direct current cannot go long distances, but it's pretty efficient, the power A to B. Alternating current can go long distances. And basically what it is direct current, power from source to whatever you're trying to power, boom, one straight line. Alternating current is, you need 2 lines connecting at the center point. And they shoot a little bit of electricity down one line, then down another. Bang, 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 back and forth. Speed of light, back and forth across 2 lines. Have you ever seen an extension cord that has 2 cords? You ever notice that? That's where power goes right down one line, speed of light, and around the other side. And so it's not a continuous energy, but because of that, it can go over long distances. You don't have one direct current, just quick flashes can go longer. It goes so fast we didn't even notice it. So this is alternating current. It's not constant electricity, but it's so fast we notice it. You plug it in, it connects to 2 lines, electricity flows. Now there are big advantages to that. You could have one supply or energy supply source could power a whole town, not just individual dynamos in every town. Economies of scale. Of course, then again, you need a massive infrastructure to get the power to people's homes. There's also one other problem. What else is a good conductor besides copper wire for electricity? A little bit. Humans. So let's say you connect the 2 cords. Like, for example, if you try to clean out an outlet with a knife, you connect the source. Yes, I know people who have done that. You connect it and not only a shock, it can kill you. And that was Edison's big selling point. AC is deadly, which it is. And so how did he prove it? Topsy the elephant was condemned for murder. Edison volunteered to kill Topsy. I'm not making the up about the condemned. He was a circus elephant. She was a circus elephant. Killed a handler because the elephant, as we all know, elephants are prone to murder. And what's the best way to deter elephant-related crime? Yeah, execution. So they literally had a trial. I am not making this up. And they condemned Topsy to death. Edison volunteered to kill Topsy with alternating current. So here's poor Topsy being let out, and they electrocuted Topsy. It took about 10 minutes. Oh yeah, they murdered Topsy, an elephant, to prove how dangerous it was. But they couldn't get past the expense and the complication of everybody having their own dynamo. So Topsy did not help DC take over, and George Westinghouse would take Tesla's basic idea to make the alternating system of a larger dynamo. And once he sold this, the efficiency of that outweighed the small dynamos, and that idea disappeared. 1900, you can see it going away, but by 1915, very few people had their own self-operating dynamo. Actually, that would be that's a pretty good idea for today. Some kind of dynamo based on wind. The solar, they tried to make it a dynamo too, and it just was too inefficient. So they have different ways of doing that. But most is still a dynamo. So that's how Westinghouse, all combined together. And so electricity by 1895, 1900, you would start seeing this in not all homes, but a lot of homes. Not rural areas till the New Deal. And now you get Edison. Because Edison's invention, so much of it was based upon electricity. Once you have electricity, you can start building incredible innovation, just incredible technological change. Menlo Park, where his lab was, if you worked at Menlo Park, you signed away the rights to your inventions to Edison. So Edison got the copyright, Edison got the patent, Edison got the monopoly. But he gave you a lab. That's the way most invention is done today. Virtually all invention is done for corporations. And so if you work for a corporation, they get whatever you make. And they get the profit for it. They as in it. The corporation is an entity, it. So his best known example, the light bulb. And of course, the light bulb would allow production 24 hours a day. It would change the factories. The two big things would be factories, how much it would change. Edison did not invent the light bulb, per se. His lab invented the filament inside that would not immediately snap. And so it would glow when you had electricity running through it, and therefore the light bulb would last longer. That's what he invented. That made a light bulb workable. The other thing it did is the threat of fire went down like a rock. Makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, you have less, just the basic elements of light was done by gas light, oil light, candles. Open flame. Within 20 years, virtually all of that was gone. In big cities, at least in some urban areas, the threat of fire went down dramatically. This would begin to revolutionize our life. But think about it, once you have electricity, what can you make out of electricity? Just a couple examples. He invented the phonograph. And the phonograph was originally on wax cylinders, but eventually on disc. The disc would be wax at first, eventually vinyl, which is plastic, by the late 1930s. And same idea. If sound waves make vibrations, can use those vibrations, imprint them on a wax cylinder, and recreate it backwards. Vibrate a stylus and see if that creates noise. And it did. Now, he had to come up with a speaker. And the first speaker would be really quiet. Basically, almost like it was a megaphone, almost. But he eventually started running these sound waves through various things. He tried everything, paper to water to wood, and he hit on what started to vibrate with the sound and would make the first speakers. And that would revolutionize phones too. You know what he sent the sound waves through? Charcoal. Charcoal vibrator. If you look at an old speaker, like an old stereo speaker, they still use it sometimes today, and rip it apart, which I did once because I was curious and I wanted to break something. It's charcoal. It's charcoal. Old phone cylinder had a little packet of, old phones had a little packet of charcoal in it. Just trial and error. Worked. The Ediphone or dictaphone, same deal. You speak into this, and a stylus makes an imprint on a wax cylinder, eventually a record, and they use the same idea to make it electronically on a tape, on a cassette, a piece of tape like a cassette tape, or reel-to-reel tape. It's all the same idea. So you can record your own voice. He tried to call it an Ediphone, which always makes me laugh. He wanted everything named after himself. Here, I like Pope Pius the 11th, using a dictabell. These be used well into the 1970s. Motion picture camera. Thomas Edison did not invent it per se, but perfected it, and one that could be used and not be too choppy. In fact, we start making short films in, well, he's in New Jersey. So the first motion picture capital of the world would be New Jersey, making little short films, little short stories. It would not be long into the 20th century that they would start doing films here. Why don't they start making them here? It's Hollywood. They had no choice. There was an element of that. That wasn't the reason they started. Weather. It's almost always sunny and the same weather every day. If you film, you have to have continuity. And so if you're filming in New Jersey and it rains all the time or even snows, that could mean days where you have to wait and wait and wait to get the right weather. In Southern California, it's basically the same all the time. So, and then that would encourage more people. There's people there. Montana, not really that good for a lot. We have issues here. Okay, let's get to another innovator, Daimler-Benz. The internal combustion engine, and that's its German patent for a car. The internal combustion engine, actually, petrol was a byproduct of the production of kerosene, and it was kind of a really volatile, didn't have much use. For some reason in the United States, we call it gas, gasoline, and you can imagine what's going to happen to the internal combustion engine inside in the 20th century. But this requires better production of steel and also a chemical industry, because it's the chemical process with petroleum that's going to make gasoline. Another one, get right to it. We got steel, we got this airplane. And it's no coincidence that Orville and Wilbur Wright, what was their business that they had? What was their business? They used a shop for their business to make a plane. Bicycles. There's a similar idea of precise, lightweight machinery. And that's the first plane, 1903. Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, even though they're from Ohio. Why Kitty Hawk? A constant, steady breeze, but not like unless a hurricane's coming out of dust. So a constant, steady breeze, because you got to go into the wind to get that lift. One of the problems the U.S. would have, though, is they patented this and they wouldn't allow anybody to improve it. So they were using basically not much different than this Wright Flyer for 10 years in America. And when everybody else started making it, for example, the French, they jumped way ahead. Now, the problem the French are going to have is that whole World War I thing would stifle innovation. So that's just right here. You look at it, just a few of these. No, you do not need to know these, except for, of course, this great one. I just thought this one was funny. So I thought that was a good patent. That's our next extra credit. If you make that, we'll go up on the roof. Sound good?
Who's our tester? Where are we letting them test us?
we'll just make enough of them so everyone can test one total. One by one, we just go alphabetical order. All right, but for example, blue jeans, he didn't do the patent in 1873, even though Strauss was selling them to gold miners by 1849. But there's Scholl's Westinghouse got involved in air brakes, but when he hit it big, air brakes for train, he hit it big on that alternating current. Like phonograph, light bulb, alkaline battery, a radio. Wow, Marconi once again perfected it. Skyscraper. One of the problems with the skyscraper is they could go higher by 1885. They just need to find an elevator. Actually, elevators weren't a problem. They could invent an elevator. But elevators, the Otis elevator would not be invented until 15 years later. He didn't invent an elevator. He invented a way to get it to stop correctly. Because you can imagine going down could be a problem. Going up is actually relatively easy. Going down, a little bit more difficult. So that gives you an idea of all that. We have to get to that. These the patent. The Patent Office, which is created by the United States Constitution, would allow for a monopoly for inventors and then eventually the big things, corporations, to profit and make money off of their inventions. And this does lead to a monopoly. There's all sorts of problems with it. And Congress can decide how long the patent is. And you can imagine companies want longer and longer and longer and longer patents. If you know anything about the pharmaceutical industry, these patents are worth trillions of dollars. And we will come back to this. And that's all the good things or all the bad things about monopolies can come out of this. But I just put the number of patents that just went up dramatically in the era of electricity. And like 276 patents in the 1790s per year. By the 2000s, there are 1.9 to 2.2 million patents every year since from 2000 to 2022. That's the last one I checked. Now, most patents are just are not going to be profitable, but some of these are going to be very profitable. And a lot of the patents too are just going to patent something to make sure no one else could use it to try to leverage money for it. For example, if you have a cell phone, Samsung patented this angle on a phone, and they sued Apple. So that's how patents can be misused. I should add that Apple did change this angle. And of course, it's Apple, so they made a whole new phone and charged more money for it. But that's what they did. In 1900, the head of the patent office said, pretty much everything that has been invented has already been invented, and we should see a real steep decline in patents. Because he couldn't wrap his mind around how much was created by electricity. Needless to say, he was slightly wrong. Innovation breeds innovation. But speaking of that, I found this thing talking about, like predictions of things from 1900, since we're at about 1900. Here's a German magazine of what they saw would be a great innovation by the year 2000. I got to admit, that would be awesome. You got to admit, right? Balloons. Of course, I remember looking at something when I was in elementary school, and it was a 16 millimeter film. That's what we had. We almost never watched film. We did a little 16 millimeter film at the street. When I first started teaching, we still had those. And it was the future. And it was by the year 2000, it was everybody would have a heliport and ride a helicopter to school. And I remember thinking, God, I really wish it would have been now. I want to be born in 2000 so I can ride a helicopter to school. Nah, didn't make it. But we have TikTok. So, 8, railroads. I don't know anything about it. Or the Instagram. I don't know anything. I know nothing about, and I'm old and I know nothing about Facebook. That's might be the most surprising. So, railroads. Railroads by themselves would be a massive factor for the Industrial Revolution, the Second Industrial Revolution. Once again, just like the first. Can't understate the value of railroads. I mean, think about how much is going to be needed to make a railroad. Just look at these trestles. How much the complicated engineering, the amount of wood, the amount of workers. Boy, does that look rickety, though. Very rickety. In the 1930s and 1940s, they would replace trestles with, these are trestles for like on mountainsides when they want to go over like valleys, and they would just simply collapse the mountain and make mounds of dirt.
I can see it safer.
Yeah, there's some issues though with like, yeah, there's issues, but one of the most important things to understand then is railroad was a product of massive government aid. And once again, not a value judgment. I see good and bad things about this, but this is direct aid like the Pacific Railroad Act and indirect aid, Pacific or the Transcontinental Railroad Act. The indirect aid, think about it. Railroads require every other industry. Railroads require the iron, the steel, the logging, the coal, the petroleum, the copper, the leather, and it requires new schooling and new forms of education. It requires new banks and new finance and new industrial practices. Railroads can't function unless they have these modern things called corporations and therefore things like the stock market. Railroads would promote everything. Railroad would be key. And so government aid for the railroad is also government aid for the steel industry. You build the railroads, you build steel. I mean, think about the massive amounts of government aid. The United States government builds the roads through taxpayer money. You build roads, that is direct government aid for cars. Government gives massive tax breaks for people who buy their own home. Huge tax breaks. That's massive government aid for construction. That's massive government aid for lumber. That's how government aid works. So this is what we call at this time producer demand. Industry bought almost everything. What industry? The railroads. So government aid bought made sure that railroads bought almost all the manufacturing goods. It's not like it is today. And I put this map of here, this graph up, I'm sorry, the amount of railroads produced, and you can really see the amount of government aid, or the amount of railroads, amount of government aid led to other industry. Now, today, beginning in the 1920s, consumer demand would become the dominant. It was pretty limited before the 1920s because of low wages. But by the 1920s, companies were producing more than other companies could provide. They needed workers to buy things. Low wages would contribute to the 1929 Great Depression. Now about 70% of the United States economy relies upon people, us, buying stuff. And if wages don't keep up, that can lead to depression. Economists have a name for that. They call it secular stagnation. I don't know what's up with economists either. That makes no sense to me. My brother's an economist. That's all I'm going to say. But so I put up this map. Look at the amount of railroad by 1870, and look at the change by 1890. It is dramatic. You can really see it. And these are just the major lines. There's nothing in Montana. It's huge. And that gets to number 9, a direct leg to number 9. A marriage between government and business. Now, this is government laissez-faire. This will be a choice on your test. So, business leaders began to realize right away, this is as old as government, but remember, even the limited democracy the United States have, it affects more campaign contributions. If business leaders, they contribute to politicians, the politicians make the rules. And they're not doing this because they want the best rules. They're not doing it because they love the democratic process. They're doing it because they want to rig the system for them. They want laws to help them. That's why Credit Mobilier is such a good example of this. The Credit Mobilier scandal shows how government and business were intertwined to rig the system for the railroads. Now that one was blatant bribery, but that's what campaign contributions do. As more and more stuff is coming out about how Boeing, who's now, Boeing used to be such an amazing company, now it's just a bunch of financiers. It's really sad. But they gave huge contributions to certain politicians to put pressure on the regulatory agencies not to regulate them. And as it turned out, they haven't been regulating them at all. They've just been taking Boeing's word for it. It's really dangerous. It actually kind of scares me. Because there have been 2 crashes of Boeing planes that killed 400 people. And then we had about a near disaster when that exit door popped off. Why? They gave money so they would make more money. So this is a classic cartoon. I like this one a lot. It's supposed to be Congress, but that's a member of Congress. But who is he really? He's bought and sold by the railroads. And you see a lot of politicians like this. Now it's a lot for bought and sold by banks. So that is laissez-faire economics. We talked about this once before, but by the end of the century, laissez-faire economics became known as conservative economics. Now, this is one of the problems, you don't go like look in the dictionary and say, oh, this is the definition of conservative in the dictionary. No, it is a term for this type of policy that's specifically designed to aid a small and narrow part of the population. They called it conservative for lots of reasons at the end of the decade. Don't read too much into the word. It's a label. But what is it? Don't mess with competition. Let them do anything possible, anything they want through competition. Anything. And this really means don't mess with monopolies. If we have a monopoly, don't mess with it. But that means do anything they want, how they treat workers. Don't worry about quality of product. Let the market solve this. Let them do anything they want, or how they compete with other companies. Let the market solve this. But massive government aid, the best examples are the railroads. So they want the direct government aid, but then let us do anything we want with the money. And we can see this time after time. Boeing gets huge amounts of government aid and then don't look at what we do. And by definition, this helps the big. Economies of scale. And so to this day, conservative economics, there are different ways to do it, but it's designed to help the big. What's another method? Well, how do you value currency? 1873, the United States formally went on what's called the gold standard. And by definition, the gold standard is deflationary, meaning the value of money either goes up or at least doesn't go down very fast. Because there's a finite amount of gold. By definition, this will help those with wealth. So the gold standard was designed to help those with wealth. Basically this, if there's deflation and the value of money is slowly going up, if you have money, if you have something very valuable, if you have wealth, you can just let it sit there and it will gain in value. And it will gain in value. Small inflation helps the workers. But as you experience with the COVID shortages, prices going up is also very disturbing to workers. The government was anti-union. That's another example. They would send the troops out to stop labor unions. The troops, the police, courts, you name it, violently anti-union. I'll tell you a little bit about 1873 right after the break. And what does this do? Unions raise wages. Unions raise wages. So this keeps wages down. This is massive government aid. Here's another example. Tariffs. Those who want tariffs call protectionists. Remember, that's a tax on imports. They want to keep out foreign competition. They don't really want a free market. They don't want competition. Keep out the competition. And so this shows, here's the United States. Here are the very high tariffs the United States had in this Gilded Age. Business made sure. They kept a very high tariff on steel, even though by 1910, the United States produced more steel than anyone else in the world. This is the tariff of abominations here. Here's the Holly Smooch tariff. But tariffs raise prices, all prices. Now, the reason they raise prices, the goal is that protects American industry so they make enough money. Or more profit if there's no competition. This is actually a big deal right now because the United States government is trying to invest in solar electricity, but China has been investing longer and more efficiently, and they might undercut, they are undercutting American industry. So now there's talk of perhaps a tariff on solar. That would raise prices but encourage American production. It's complex. Here is showing the government and manufacturing and a protective tariff and squeezing the farmer through high prices. That's from the 1890s cartoon. Those who don't want tariffs are called free traders. They want the competition to cut prices. Free traders would eventually take over for various reasons that we'll get to by the 1960s. We are back to more protections. All of these are massive bits of government aid, huge government aid. And that's where we get this great cartoon, two great cartoons. This is Rockefeller, Standard Oil. And here he is, you see the dollar signs and picking the president. But one of my favorite parts is now, to the businessman's point of view, the capital is just like another factory producing goods for them as they put the money in. Here's the most famous one. It's called the Bosses of the Senate. I made it in big letters so you can see it. And a trust is another word for monopoly. And so here we have the steel trust, copper trust, oil trust, iron trust, coal trust, sugar trust, dominating Congress. And this Senate is for the monopolies, by the or of the monopolies, by the monopolies, for the monopolies. I think that's a very clever cartoon. Last bit of government aid. No restrictions on immigration. And Ellis Island would process millions of immigrants. And so this would become one of the symbols of this new wave of immigration. And as you can see right here, this is the big wave right here of immigration. If you get a chance, go to New York City. Ellis Island is pretty amazing. And unlike previous immigration, this new immigration after the Civil War, a lot of Southern and Eastern Europe. Why? Cheap U.S. farm good was flooding the market. Same thing's happening in Mexico in the 1990s, and it's happening in Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua right now. In the short run, immigration lowers wages. In the short run. In the long run, it increases the size of the market and therefore more production and actually raises wages. It's no coincidence that this wave of new immigration, near the end of it, would coincide with Birth of a Nation, and what group would make a reappearance after Birth of the Nation? In my mouse. The Klan. And that's part of the reason why the Ku Klux Klan was, so much of it was anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic, anti-Semitic, anti-Jew. But that is direct government aid for business. Businesses don't contribute to politicians unless they sell something for return. And that will be one of your choices.
Yeah.
Government laissez-faire and also factors of the industrial revolution. All right. Good. So at lunch, if anybody wants to come in, I'll answer questions. If people come in, let me know. You want to come in here real quick? And you can bring your lunch or whatever. I will answer any question you have. I might give better hints. My favorite historian is Steve Brooks coming.